So it was April 1st, and I remember the principal came to my classroom and said, "Mark, I need you to come to the office." And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, I bet my mom's like pulling me out of school and we're gonna go play hooky and go do something. I was excited. And then when I get into the principal's office, there was two police officers there, and they had faxed over a photo of me, like printed out a big like picture of me, and my heart sunk, and I knew instantly, like, the jig is up. Like, I knew. And they're like, "Do you know that you're kidnapped?" And then I just started bawling. And from there, they put me into this foster home.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to A Shot of Inspiration. I'm Greg Stevens, your host. Joining me today from our training crate is my Quaker Hanja co-host, sidekick, and man's best friend, Finley. And today's guest is Mark Labriola II. I got to put the second in there. We're thrilled to have Mark here because he is the founder of Brand Viva Media. It's a thriving content production agency making waves in podcasting, video production, e-learning, and more. Mark's journey is a compelling blend of resilience, creativity, and re-innovation from his unconventional childhood and tour life as a musician, including a run on American Idol, to turning a basement side hustle into a full-blown creative studio. His story is as inspiring as it is unique. Mark, thanks so much for being on the show.
Greg, thanks for having me on the show. I love how Finley just perked up and looked to the camera. He knew his cue. Like, as soon as you started talking, she was just like,
she's the bomb. She knows her
"Oh,
stuff.
yeah." She's just like staring at the camera like, "All right, it's time for my close-up."
Exactly. And now I'm ready to go take a nap. So we're going to put her in the waiting room, bring her back at the end, because I want to hear about your story. When I met Mark, he had me on his podcast, The Friday Habit. That's the name of it, is it? The Friday
Yeah,
Habit.
yeah.
Yeah,
Friday habit. Yeah.
The Friday Habit. And he was a great interviewer. And then after the show is when we sat down and started talking. And when we started talking, I thought, man, you've got to be on my show. He was gracious enough to be here today. So, Mark, let's talk a little about that conversation we got into, just a little
Yeah.
about your life. I didn't know much about you, but you got in, you started, just pulled me in with your story. Lead in with that and just bring the audience in, and we'll just take this organically wherever it goes.
Yeah. I always want to just encourage people. I just want to always encourage people that you're not so far from where you want to be, and you have what it takes within you to be successful. So many times people approach me and they tell me a sad story about their childhood or some hard thing that they went through, and they feel discouraged and they feel that, oh, I had these setbacks, so this is why I can't achieve anything, or I've had this misfortune happen to me, and so this is why I'm not capable of doing these things. But I always want to just tell people that, man, you know what? No matter where you're from, no matter what you've gone through, like, you're able to overcome those challenges and achieve success. And really, I look at my own life, and as you alluded in my story, I've done so many amazing things, and I look back and I feel so blessed. I should be 500 pounds in an alley with a needle in my arm somewhere, but I got three beautiful children and a wife of 21 years that we're going to be celebrating this fall. And I just think that, man, how did I get here? And yeah, so my story starts off really all the way back in the early 80s. When I was born, my parents were hippies in the 70s in the Florida Keys, and they connected and had my sister and then had me, and then they quickly split, and I never knew my parents together. I lived with my dad until I was about 3, 4 years old. And in the middle of the night, my mom, she actually called my dad and said, "Hey, I'm just passing through town. Can I just stay at your house for the evening? And then I'll be on my way." My dad was gracious enough and let her stay with us. And in the middle of the night, she woke me up and she kidnapped me. So then we were on the run for 6 years. And during that time, I was exposed to a lot of stuff. And it really wasn't until my mid 30s where I had this realization of all the child abuse that I had been through living with my mom. She was a very eccentric, free-spirited hippie person, and enrolled in a lot of interesting circles with drug addicts and hippies and prostitutes and all sorts of crazy stuff. And at a young age, I was really exposed to a lot of traumatizing things. But that was just my life. And I think that a lot of people go through certain things and you just think that's normal. until for me, it was this realization that, man, when I had my kids, I looked at them and I was thinking, man, when I was their age, I was doing my homework in a strip club, or like I was watching my mom sniff lines of coke off a table and have these raging parties. That's like horrible. Like any good parent would never do these things to their children. And so then in 91, I was 10 years old, and my dad had been looking for me with a private investigator in a missing children organization. And they found me, and I was in Hawaii. They ran the sting operation and pulled me from school. And Delta was doing a program for missing children back in the day, and they flew my dad out to pick me up and brought me back to Colorado. But I would say that it was pretty traumatizing because in the same way that I was in a very abusive a situation as a kid, I didn't really feel that way. And at the time, I really loved my mom and couldn't imagine being separated from her, but I was. And I went from this really worldly, just wild environment to my dad, who had become a Christian in the late 70s, early 80s. And now I was living in this legalistic fundamentalist Baptist home. And so some of my behaviors, such as cussing like a sailor as a 10-year-old and all these different things that I was just used to living this wild life, came to a quick end with my dad. And so,
I bet you saw more before you were 10 than most people see most of their life.
yeah, looking back, like I said, some of the adventures, we lived in Hare Krishna temples and just also all over the place. We lived in Hawaii and Alaska. And yeah, it was pretty wild as a kid. And moving in with my dad at a young age, my sister, I had a sister, a full blood sister that was there living with her with my dad. And so I got to reconnect with her, which was good. But I guess I always missed my mom at that young age. I didn't know any better. It was hard for me to kind of adjust. And then my dad, too, we just were very different. And he grew up in a home, Italian family in New Jersey. His dad was very unloving and a jerk. And so he never really knew how to love. My dad never got taught what it looked like to be a good father or a good parent. And so because of that, he was pretty hard on us. He was pretty abusive. His whole mindset was spare the rod, spoil the child. And so because of that, I think I lived in a lot of fear as a kid. And I think as a creative and kind of absent-minded, I was always getting in trouble for little things that were hard for me. I have dyslexia, and school never came naturally to me, and I never really had any good support or help around that. So at 16, I ran away from home. And I actually had a friend whose family ran a foster home. And so I lived in that foster home until I graduated high school. During that time, I was working at Little Caesars Pizza, and there was a kid there who was going to this church, and he was like, "Hey, you should come to youth group with me." So I started going to youth group with him. And one day when we were in the kitchen of Little Caesars making pizzas and doing dishes and stuff, this Creed song came on the radio, and My Own Prison came on, and we both started singing this song. And we looked at each other and it was like, "Oh, I sing and he sings." And I was like, "Oh, do you like music?" And we're like, "Yeah, we did." As a sophomore in high school, I got pulled into this group of kids at this youth group. And then my junior year of high school, we started this band and started writing music and kind of playing music for kids in the youth group and stuff like that. And did that through high school, and then into college. I didn't really go to school, but I lived in a house with a bunch of guys that went to school. And so we all lived together and we kept the band together. And we ended up competing in this national band competition. And we had been together for a few years at that point, and we recorded like a little demo CD, and we competed in this national band competition, and we ended up winning first place. And so through that, we were able to go and record in this recording studio in Indiana. And then we made this like 4-song EP and started touring. Everyone dropped out of college and they were just like, "We want to do music." And so that was my life. Like all of my 20s was playing music and traveling coast to coast. We actually ended up getting signed by a Christian record label, and I was able to achieve everything I ever dreamed about, songs on the radio. And Our album was sold all over the world. I really felt, wow, like we made it. And then the band broke up, as every good band does. People started getting married, having kids. We started growing apart. You change a lot from when you're a kid with your best friends, just playing music. And then you have different desires and want to do different things. And we grew apart and we ended up breaking up. And I was pretty sad and devastated. But my dad had called me, and rewind a couple years when I was probably about 20. So I left home when I was 16, and then I didn't speak to him again until I was like 21. For whatever reason, I felt in my heart like I should reach out to him. And I connected with him, and we sat down and talked, and I was able to confront him on anything that had ever hurt me or anything that stood out in my brain that felt like it was traumatizing me, I guess you could say. I confronted him, and he was able to give me one of three answers. One of, hey, I was a single parent. I thought I was doing my best. Or two, I was involved in this religion and I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do because of that. Or three, I was wrong and I'm sorry. And so we got that closure and started building our relationship back up during that time. And so then when the band broke up, he reached out to me and he said, hey, American Idol's coming into town and here in Denver. And I was like, I'm burned on the whole music industry and all that. And I think I'm done with music. But he's, listen, I'll drive up. He was living at Texas at the time. And so I'll drive up and I'll wait with you in line and you should just try out. They're in your backyard. And so I said, okay, I'll give it a try. We'll go stand in line. And lo and behold, I just kept making it past all these rounds and finally made it to the celebrity judges round with Simon and all the judges and got a ticket to Hollywood. And in that moment, I was thinking, oh, okay, this is what I was made for. This is why I had the music career in the Christian rock band and did all that. It's for this moment so that I could be rich and famous and be in Hollywood and win American Idol. 2 weeks into Hollywood, and after three rounds, I get axed in the group rounds in Hollywood. And man, that was devastating. It was heartbreaking. I remember going back to my hotel room and just sobbing and thinking, ah, my life's over. Had been married for a few years at that point, and I had my first kid. He was like a year and a half. I had no college education. I had no network really, and I was devastated. I just thought my life's over. And when the band broke up, I got a job at the Cherry Creek Apple store here in the mall. And so I started working at the mall because I loved Apple computers. So I was like, all right, well, at least I could be around Macs all day and talk about them because it's easy for me to do.
Right.
And then I picked up a camera, and I had a buddy who was a creative and he was a photographer. And so I picked up a camera and started doing photography and video, and just as a side hustle, something creative. And then once I got into that, people started asking me like, hey, can you do a video for me or can you do photos for me? And so I said yes. And so nights and weekends, I started a side hustle doing photography, video. I learned graphic design, like whatever I could do to make a buck. My wife and I made a decision that we wanted her to stay home with the kids. And so I did what I could do to make that a reality. And so I worked my job during the day, and then nights and weekends would do editing and shoots and stuff like that. And did that for several years and worked my way up. I left Apple and went to another company and worked my way up and went to another company. I ended up as the creative director for this real estate tech startup in town and was getting paid really well, had a nice salary, and was pretty comfortable because I still had my side hustle making an extra 30, 40 grand a year there, and then had my full-time job with benefits and a really nice salary. And was there for about 2 years. And then the first week of January of 2016, they had some huge funding come in and they laid off half the company. And so at that point, I had no severance, no savings. I got three kids, a mortgage, a wife, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And so I thought I could go get another director job somewhere, or I could take a shot at my side hustle and see if I could turn it into a full-time thing. So I hit the ground running. I just took everything that came my way. I worked hard, and here we are almost a decade later. And I have a handful of W-2 employees and several 1099s, and have a great office space here in Denver. And I'm a blessed man.
That's such a good story. I've got so many questions from the beginning to now.
Yeah,
So
let's
I'm
get
gonna,
into it. So that lays
yeah,
out the foundation of everything, and then we can
that's
talk about anything
beautiful.
else in between.
Yeah, I want to go through each piece. So let's go back to when your mother took you, and
Hmm.
you probably didn't know a lot that was going on. You were so young. What was your mindset at that time, if you can remember?
Yeah, I think looking back, and I remember people were like, "Oh, were you scared or whatnot?" But honestly, my dad was a really a tough person. He had that kind of rough exterior. He wasn't that loving or caring or nurturing.
Yeah.
And so, as a young kid, I think it's really important to have that in your life. And I think that's God's design, right? To have a husband and a wife, and the husband is there to push the children to grow up and to work hard and work for themselves. And then I think the mother's there to be nurturing and kind and patient and loving, like all these kind of nurturing things. And my dad, being a single parent, he never knew that, or I don't think he understood how to operate or be like that. He just knew how to be that rough exterior of a person. And so as a kid, the memories I have of him, I remember I was left-handed. I'm left-handed, but that was not good. Left is wrong, right is right. So he'd put the pencil in my right hand and smack my left hand and be like, left is wrong, right is right. And he'd try to get me to be right handed. Or I remember I put my shoes on backwards. And so I'd get spanked for putting my shoes on backwards. And just all these little things like that, I think add up. And in my mind as a kid, I look back and I just think, oh, like he's mean and scary. And Denise, my mom, and I knew her. I had some faint memories of her being a little young. I'd spend some time with her. We were with her for the first few years of my life before my dad got us. And so I just remember like, all right, let's go. And I had this sense of we were Bonnie and Clyde, like we were outlaws and just on this adventure. And she was a pathological liar and a master manipulator. And any situation we could get in, I could just see her and she would spin some story to the police officers or whatever and work her way out of any situation. She had a superpower when it came to that.
What did she tell you about your dad? Was it we are getting away from him, or did she just say we'll see him later, or what were you told
Yeah, it
about
was
that?
not, it was just like, let's go. And I remember like whenever I was being bad, like she'd threaten to send me back to my dad. If I was misbehaving, it would be like, I'm going to send you back to your dad. And I'd quickly get in line and be like, I don't want to go back.
So let's fast forward. You've gotten to Krishna temples, you've seen a wild life for people. Then you get found. What was that moment like? And what did it feel like to be reintroduced into kind of, in some level, an oppressive home, definitely compared to where you were, but
Yeah.
also the memories of what you had? What was that like? Explain that for us.
Yes. Everyone had been praying for little Mark and hearing the stories about my dad and me being taken. And they threw this big celebration in the fellowship hall, and there was presents everywhere. And there was a handful of kids that were my age that I really just connected with and became friends. And actually, one of my best friends to this day, shout out to Adam Shutt, he's still one of my best friends. And we met back then when I was 10 years old. So,
That's amazing. Let me ask, what happened with your mom? Did she go to prison? Have you seen her since? If so, do you have a relationship with her?
yeah. So, my dad was extremely gracious. And because of some loopholes with the system, and because she was never physically served papers of
Mhm.
custody, there was a loophole where he could choose to not press charges against her if he so chose to. And for whatever reason, he said, this is suffering enough. And he didn't press any type of charges against her. I have a half brother that was 2 years old at the time that was with her. And so then I didn't hear anything. I remember, and this is the thing I think that was really hard too as a kid. So I had to go through all this counseling. So they would bring us in and they would call my mom, they would call her, and we'd have to do like conference calls with this counseling session. But My mom, again, being a pathological liar, she had lied so much. I remember there were so many things. Like she had two or three different names. It was like Lakshmi and Genevieve, and her real name was Denise. And I remember not knowing that, being like, oh, I knew Lakshmi and Genevieve. Those are her personalities that she would bring depending on where we were and who we were talking to. And then the other really weird one, and this is, I think as a kid, it broke my brain, is they were like, she's 36 years old or something like that. And I was like, no, we just celebrated her 24th birthday. Like,
Right.
and then as a kid too, you're not thinking, oh, I'm 10 and we're celebrating her 24th birthday. So that means she would have had to have me when you're just like, oh, we're having a 24th birthday party for Lakshmi, like with all of her friends and all this other kind of stuff. And she was a very beautiful woman, very thin and blonde hair, blue eyes, very attractive and looked very young. And so I guess she looked a decade younger than she was at the time. And so I just remember that being weird. Wait, no, like she's not 30 something. She's like 24.
Wow.
And yeah, so that was really wild. And then after those counseling sessions, it was like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 sessions that we had to go through. From then, I never talked to her again until I left home. And at 16, I started writing letters actually to her through my neighbor. I remember my grandparents on her side would send me birthday presents. And so I had their address. And so I would write her letters and give them to my neighbor to mail for me. And then my mom would mail a letter back to me through my neighbor. And then I'd sneak out and meet up with my neighbor friend, and she would give me the letter. And so we were communicating towards the end via that way. And then when I ran away from home, I reconnected her. And essentially what happened was, and I found out this later, is that she went off the deep end and she ended up somehow breaking her leg and going back to Knoxville, Tennessee, where she was from originally, and started going to church with her parents and my little brother, and then ended up meeting a minister there, and they got married. And so then when I reconnected with her, she was married, and my little brother was 8 or 9 or however he was at that time. So we reconnected, and she had gotten her life together for a short period of time. And then, probably in the early 2000s, it really all started falling apart again. She started getting on prescription drugs and back on alcohol and sneaking out and really just falling back into addiction. And there was a season where I remember I would call her any time of day, morning, noon, or night, and she was never sober. She was always drunk. And then also being a liar, she would tell me some sob story about how she has cirrhosis and she's dying, and I'd be crying and devastated. And I'd tell my friends, please pray for my mom, she's dying. And then that was all a lie and just manipulative and
Right.
whatever. And so for a long time, and I was always trying to have her part of my life because I thought she's my mom, and I had that emotional connection to her and really trauma bonded in some ways to her. But like I said, when I turned 35, I was making all these efforts to have her a part of my life, and there was always some sort of lie or some sort of story like why she couldn't come out or couldn't meet my newest newborn kid or whatever. I started to think about, wow, out of my entire life, I only spent 6 years with her. And out of those 6 years, I was subject to sexual abuse and all these traumatizing things. Like, why am I trying so hard to force this person into my life? And then I confronted her about it. And it was the straw that broke the camel's back. Was she just really blew it off, or just tried to be like, oh, I don't know about that. What's the weather like in Denver? And it was just like, okay, I think I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done trying. I don't
Comple-
really need this person in my life anymore.
Completely different experience than the conversation with your father.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so with your father, it sounded like he took ownership of where he was, no matter what it was. Yeah, and I understand there's no manual for being a parent, and
Yeah.
you're just trying to do the best you can, typically, I find. And in that, but a completely different experience. Share with us what that did for your relationship with your father. So it sounds like your mother and you had a completion of sorts,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then your father, you came and had the conversation with him. Who initiated that, you or your father?
That was me. Yeah. I think it was like close to Father's Day, and I just had this feeling in my heart like I feel like I should reach out to him.
Yeah.
And so I did, and that kind of led to that conversation. And then, yeah, from there, it was a long road of restoration. I think for me, there was some initial healing that took place from that conversation and closure. But then there's an element of an old man's going to be an old man unless they decide to change and be a new person and make a change in their life. Like they're going to be the same person. And so for me, it was trying to extend grace and trying to weigh out that, you know what, there's all this stuff that I don't like and that I disagree with and that I don't click with. But then there's some of these good things. There's some of these positive things. And I just had to make the decision, do I allow these negative things to take that relationship away from me, take it away from my kids? My dad's a great grandpa. He's always remembering birthdays and sending thoughtful gifts and all those kind of things. So I was like, okay, taking that away from my children, or can I just move on? Can I forgive and just not harbor that bitterness and anger towards him for his character flaws?
Yeah. Yeah. And it freed you when you did it, didn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Exactly. It's like
Yeah.
I no longer live in bondage. And when something comes up that's irritating or frustrating about his character or personality flaws, I just have to be like, all right, I don't take it personally. I
Right.
just let it roll off.
Yeah. I love
I
that.
stay in a happier state.
Yeah. And that's a level of maturity. I find when we forgive, we're the ones who are freed up rather than holding it around, holding on to it. I also believe that's probably what your attitude, I have to say, it's been mature, it's been forward thinking, it's been let's not stay in the past, let's go forward. And then you get out and you do your band and you do all of that. Now, I'm a big Creed fan. So when
Okay,
he said that,
nice. Yeah.
I love that. Mom in Prison, one of my favorite when he said that. So what did you do? What were you the vocals in the band? Did you
Yeah, yeah.
play?
I sang and then wrote music and you played a little guitar depending on the song.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. And so did you miss the band when it broke up?
Yeah, definitely. I think right away, for sure. We were together for a decade and really during formative years and whatnot. But then now people ask me, oh, do you miss it? And I look back and I say, no, it's a beautiful chapter in my life, but I really don't miss it. And thinking about the life I have now, my kids and all this stuff, there were seasons where we were only home 2 weeks out of 3 months because
Yeah.
we were touring, we're in the studio, we're doing all this stuff. And so it's just not a conducive life to family and relationships.
What
So,
was the band's name?
so I was in a band called Foolish Things.
Foolish Things. Okay.
Yeah, and you can find that on Spotify still. Even Now was our last record, and it still holds up after all these years.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Now, do you ever see any of the people from the band?
Yeah, so actually, one of my employees is an old bandmate, and then a few of the other guys they live around town. One of them lives up in the mountains. We don't really see him, and then one of them actually lives in Sweden. His wife was from Sweden, and they ended up moving there. And there was a season before COVID where we would get together once a year and just reminisce and connect, but it's been a long time since
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I want to jump to the American Idol thing. When you first got up and you sang, was it something that, because to get that far, you have to get in some level of flow, I think, some level of getting plugged back in. When you started from the first audition that you did, it come right away, or did you just get lucky and the confidence build along the way?
Yeah, there's a lot of mental preparation that kind of goes into it. And one is you have this idea of what you think the show is when you watch it on TV. And then there's the aspect of what the show actually is and the reality aspect of it. And I was thinking that was one of the things that really benefited me is being in a creative industry, being in the music industry, having some sort of exposure to it. I had this self-awareness about the cast that they were building and understanding that there's kind of these characters that make up the show. And so then I started to think about what character am I going to be in this? And if you look at my audition, I was going for the chubby funny guy because they always need the chubby funny guy in all these casts of people. So that was my role. And then again, I had this fantastical story about being kidnapped and all. And so that obviously plays really well. And that was, I think, one of the hard things for me is I had restored my relationship with my dad. I restored at the time my relationship with my mom. And so they were really wanting me to throw them under the bus on
Right.
national television and really go hard on the story. And I just feel like it wouldn't have been honoring to them if I had done that. And especially there's 35 million people watching, and my dad had driven up and taken me to the auditions and was there. It's like I wasn't going to start like bashing him about what a horrible dad he was on national television. This is all temporary. All this is not going to last. And so that was one of the things you'll see again. Simon, he comes out of the gate because he knows the story. The producers have all like filled him in on who each one of these peoples are. And so he says, "Tell me something interesting about yourself." And I think that from there he wanted me to be like, I was kidnapped and we were on the run. And so I was like, I like cheese. And then from there he's, what about your mom took you? And I was like, yeah. So then I tried to dance around the issue as best I could on television, but
Right. But of course, I understand they'd want to headline that at one level. And like you said, talk about restoring and honoring a relationship. We all make mistakes. We're not there. And planning that for most people to think the rest of their life. That's one of the things I love about having you on. You've completed those things from my perspective. I coach people around relationships. What I get is that you've completed the things. It was messy at times, and doesn't mean some people completion, you mean it's over? No, it just means it has no more hold over you. I tell people all the time, you can complete a relationship and work next to a person every day. What do you mean?
yeah.
The things that were bothering you with that person just don't bother you anymore, and you can relate with them like a new person. It takes some
Mhm.
work to get there, but when you do, it's very freeing. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do the American Idol, you get out, then you get the job, everything seems like it's going great, and then you get laid off with just a ton of people. I love the fact that you found a job at Apple. You go do what you're doing, but you're looking for other avenues of income to try to take care of your family and all the different things you've been doing. And then it ended up that was your life vest, so to speak, side hustles that you didn't think of. But all that happened because you were actually active out there doing something. Never
Yeah.
would have happened had you just waited for it to come to you.
Mhm.
What pulled you into that? I know you had an interest in, oh, I can do these videos, but so many times those you said people just started showing up and asking you to do this, asking you to do this. Before you knew it, it was a nice little side gig that eventually is what you do now. Tell us some of the doubts or some of the challenges I know you had as those things showed up.
Yeah. One of the things I always say is that you need to put yourself in a position to receive. And if you're just stuck at home, if you're just binge watching Netflix, if you're just scrolling endlessly through YouTube, if you're not making connections, then you're not in a place to receive. And over the past couple years, my philosophy too has changed into sowing seeds. I'm a Christian and I believe that God is working on my behalf, that he's gone before me, that he's making a way, that he cares for me, right? That he's a good heavenly father and he knows how to take care of his children. And so there's an element of my faith where I can just trust that. In the Bible, it talks about how in Matthew, it says that God takes care of the lilies of the fields and the birds of the air. Like, how much more is he going to take care of his children? And so there's that sense of just resting and trusting. And so one of the things that I've come to more recently has been this idea of sowing seeds. As a farmer, the farmer, he sows the seeds, he waters the seeds, but he's not out there screaming at the seed, grow, seed, grow. No, he's got to trust the process, right? Trust that he's going to do his part and then nature is going to do its part. And so that's how I look at life right now is that, you know what, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to plant those seeds and I'm going to water those seeds, but then I'm going to just trust. Because in this culture nowadays, there's this hustle, grind, crush, and create the right email sequence and funnel system to capture the right people and write the magical copy that's going to make people take action. And there's all this work and strife that goes into growing a business and fear and worry and all this stuff. And I just came to a place where I was like, you know what? I just need to do my part and then trust that the rest is going to work out. And so earlier on, I remember, yeah, I've got these three children, a mortgage, and a wife, and I'd get a gig for $500, I'd take it. I'd get a gig for $200, I would take it. And then I'm like, I don't have enough money to pay my mortgage. And I'd have all this stress and anxiety and worry. And then all of a sudden, someone would call and be like, hey, I have a project for $7,000. Can you come do it? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, I can. And that kind of started happening enough to where I started to see, all right, what if I live my life in a way that I expected those blessings to take place? If I knew in 2 weeks someone was going to call and offer me a job for $7,000, I wouldn't be anxious. I wouldn't have worry. I wouldn't be not present with my children. I would just be at peace. And so I really started taking on this mantra of being present, not worrying how things are going to work out, and expect God's blessing. And that kind of just followed me throughout this past decade, and it has done very well for me.
I love that. I need to learn that just as well. I find myself worrying over certain things and I don't need to. And I
Yeah.
appreciate your words of wisdom and insight because I'm the same way. I have some of the same similar beliefs. And am I practicing them? That's the big
Yeah.
thing. And
Right. Yeah. Because if I believe who I say God is, like, why wouldn't I receive that? Like, why wouldn't I live in that? And so I think that's been the biggest thing for me. And that what I try to teach my children through is like, no matter what, I look back at my life and I see, hindsight, they say is always 2020. And I look back and I say, man, somebody was looking out for me. And if God was looking out for me back then, like, why would he not be faithful going forward? And then I look at through all the different things, like all the different situations were molding me and shaping me, and all the failures and all the scrapes and bruises and bumps shaped me into who I am today. And so then would I take those things back? It's no, because then I wouldn't be who I am. If I didn't get rejected from American Idol, I never would have like pushed so hard into a side hustle. And it's like all these like things. And I can look at it in those moments. I remember thinking, like, God, why would you do this? And sometimes I think about my own children. As a father, I have this 1,000-foot view of everything, right? It's like you're looking into a parade from the 100th story of a building in New York, and you see the Macy's parade from the beginning and the end, and I can see it all. And in my own kids' lives, I say, hey, man, if you hang out with these people, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. You're the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. And I've been through a lot. And I know that, man, if I didn't have these young guys who brought me into this youth group at this young age and were pulling me into a positive thing, like I probably would have got sucked into this other group. And that would have changed my life drastically. And so it's like I can see all these things and then attribute that to God, that he's just a heavenly father. And he knows, hey, man, I know you're bummed that American Idol didn't work out, but I got this great plan for you. And if you just trust me, and you just believe that I care about you, I'm going to get you through all this, and it's going to be way better than you ever imagined.
yeah. So many times in my life, I'm the same way. I can see something that was taken away. It seemed like it was, now I've got the saying, I'm never rejected, I'm always protected. And I'm covered
Yeah.
if I just trust that spot, that space, that the right thing is falling in place. And wait to see
Yeah,
how
exactly.
cool it is because usually it's much cooler than I could have imagined. And it
Yes.
just so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. We didn't get to talk much about your business. So what I would like to do is tell people what you do and how they can find you. Because I want to make sure we funnel people to you that hear you. You've got a great podcast. And so talk about your podcast, talk about your business, and then tell us how to get in touch with you.
Yeah, for sure. So my business is called Brand Viva Media, and we create the content that you use for marketing. And our main focus is on podcasting and video content. And then we do a lot of other stuff like online courses and conference video content, all these other kind of things. And you can go to brandvivamedia.com or brandviva.com to find more about that. And yeah, and then so I have that. And then I also have the Friday Habit podcast, which I started 5 years ago with my buddy Ben Manley. And we started that show just off of wanting to connect with each other once a week, and then also try to encourage people to hear stories of other entrepreneurs, other thought leaders, other experts in fields to help us spend more time working on our business instead of always in our business. So that's just become a labor of love for me to be able to meet great people like you, and then also share back with our audience of ways that they can do business better.
Yeah, I love that. It has been a pleasure actually getting to be here with you. You got to promise to come back on for a later episode because I really would love to go deeper and talk a little about some of the things you're doing to help people. I'm going to go ahead and let Finley back in here, but you got to promise you'll be on again for us.
All right. Yeah, I'll come back for sure. And I've been thinking about writing that book, but I don't know where to begin. So maybe once I do that, I'll come back and
Hey, let me tell you from experience, go ahead and write it, get it out of you, because otherwise it's like having a long pregnancy. You don't want that.
yeah,
You don't want to be 10, 12 months pregnant. I was
that's
like
good.
19 years pregnant.
Oh,
So
yeah.
needed
Okay.
to get it out of me. So when it did, it was a real relief. I don't even think about it now. Used to, it consumed a lot of my brain power. Now I don't even think about it. So please write it.
Yeah.
People will need to hear it. It's your chance to put it out there in the printed word so people can either read it or even listen to it. So, Mark, thank you so much for being on the show. And folks, I really hope you enjoyed this. I know I did. And if you like or subscribe, that would help us, or even share it with a friend. Helps us get our positive message out to those who might want to hear it. And I'm Greg Stevens with my Quaker Hanja Finley. And as always, thank you for listening, and be bold, be courageous, and respectfully speak your truth. Thanks so much, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.